Hello, I'm Joel.
And I'm Alex.
Welcome to the Commander's Journey, the place where we discuss our favorite format of Magic from the perspective of a new player
and an experienced one.
Now, this journey is meant for new Magic players who are interested in Commander.
And this episode, we're going to talk about some mechanics. And Joel, I got a card to show you.
Okay.
Hopefully this is new. This is definitely a brand new for Joel and hopefully new to most of our audience. This is a great card.
And see, we've been preparing for this episode for over a month now.
Yes.
Talking about doing this episode for new players mechanics. So he's like, I got this thing, and you can't see it. So I'm okay.
We're ready. Here we go.
So this card, you just handed me the phone, but Ambiguity. It's 2 and 2 blue for an enchantment that says whenever a player plays a spell that counters a spell that has been played, or a player plays a spell that comes into play with counters, that player may counter the next spell played or put an additional counter on a permanent that has already been played but not countered. What the hell? I'm going to count how many times this says counters in there. One.
That's quite a lot.
The 2, 3, 4, 5 times it says the word counter or countered or counters.
You did a fantastic job reading that. I really thought we were going to have to read it a few times.
I still don't know what it means, though. What does it do?
That's what I'm about to say. It's ambiguity, right? No one's quite
ambiguous.
Sure what it does. This is an uncard, just so everyone knows. So it was made from the joke set, pretty much. But it's an actual Magic set. You just can't play it in competitive play.
Not legal.
It's not legal. But it is fun.
Commander?
It was for 3 months in 2018, I want to say. So there's that.
Well, shame on you if you put that in your deck, because that's annoying.
Yeah, it pretty much says the jot down, the TLDR is whenever a player plays a spell that counters a spell, or a spell that comes into play with counters, you may counter that next spell or push an additional counter. So pretty much if you play a counter, or you put a counter something, you also get to put a counter. Or if they counter something, you also get to counter something, is the long and short of it. But it's very confusing. It's purposely pointing out the fact they use counter as both a term for, to stop the cast or after the cast is something so it doesn't get played.
So it's like they're playing
that one. It's
like a joke on themselves.
Yes.
Like we call those things you put on your creatures counters, but we also call these counter spells to counter something. Okay.
Exactly, and that's the joke, is that it's kind of taken its own vernacular, and they realize how ridiculous it is.
That's pretty funny. Well, we're stoked about this episode, talking about mechanics, because as most of you know, if you've been listening, if you haven't, I'm brand new to Magic. I'm brand new to Commander. I've only been playing this year, so 10 months now, as of the day we're recording this. Alex has been playing for a little bit longer than I have, but we wanted to make a podcast for new players, and one thing that always stumbled me, or kind of got me confused sometimes, was the mechanics of these different cards. In the history of Magic, there's so many mechanics, 100 or more than 100, hundreds, I guess, a bunch of keywords in Magic. But today we're just going to talk about a few. We're going to talk about a few that kind of slipped me up a little bit. So hopefully newer players that are in the same mindset as I was will kind of get some benefit from this.
And hopefully, just so everyone knows too, I'm not a judge. I am not any level judge. Hopefully I can just do a version of explaining what the card does in a way that, newer players can understand. It won't cover every corner case. Often it won't be exactly what the text says or what the goal is. I think we're going to read pretty much a version of what the quick thing in the rules says, and then go ahead with our explanation of it as much as possible to try to help understand it or make it grokkable. Because honestly, the rules, when you try to read it and you're not an experienced Magic player, and even for an experienced Magic player, is a little hard to grok.
Yeah. What do you mean by grok?
Like understand, like just grasp. Yeah. I mean, where does the term grok come from? Anyways,
I don't know.
I've used it so often, I don't know where I pulled it from.
Well, you just pulled it on me. I don't know.
Well, there you go.
Well, anyway, some of these mechanics. When I first started playing, I played Arena, right, for the first month. That's kind of how I got into it. My brother was like, "Hey, you should play this game called Commander." But when I was playing, a lot of these different mechanics, effects, the computer would just do it for me. So I didn't really think about it. Once I started playing paper Magic, it became really important to understand these mechanics. So maybe you're playing Arena a lot and you want to play more standard games. You want to play more Commander games, or any. All these mechanics apply to the game of Magic. So we're gonna go through them, and hopefully, like Alex was saying, like on a 101 level, just give you kind of a dumbed down version to explain basically how they work without being an in-depth rule version.
Exactly, because
basically.
99% of the time, this is going to be exactly how you utilize it. There might be some corner case. That's the case for all of Magic, just so everyone knows. Layers are a thing that exists in Magic. It causes a whole bunch of problems. You'll see them more in Commander games, sadly, than your average game. But honestly, there's a certain point where amongst your friends, kind of, look it up, or if you really get stuck on something, or have someone help out, because there are things where they don't entirely make sense as easily as they should. But hopefully, again, that happens maybe 1% of the time, I'd say.
Yeah, and don't be intimidated to ask somebody that you're playing with. People that have been playing the game are more than happy to explain things to you, even if they seems like they're doing it a few times. They don't mind because they enjoy playing the game. So we're going to start off. The first mechanic we're going to talk about is indestructible. So different effects that say destroy or don't destroy. So you can't destroy it, right?
Exactly. It's effects that say destroy, don't destroy this. There are a couple other workarounds, but that's the fast and short of it. We have an example card here.
Yeah, so the example card is Darksteel Colossus. It costs 11 generic mana for an artifact creature golem. Darksteel Colossus is indestructible. If Darksteel Colossus will be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal Darksteel Colossus and shuffle it into its owner's library, and instead, it's an 11/11. So it says just says Darksteel Colossus is indestructible.
That's the one we're looking at here. We weighted the whole card, and I tried to pick out cards that you might see in a Commander game or a format that you'd run into. But Indestructible was one I know, Joel, you had a little bit of trouble with early on about what could destroy it and what can't. The main thing is things that say destroy can't destroy it. So let's say if you're going to hit someone with a destruction effect on a card, and then you say, well, I'm indestructible, it doesn't matter. Sometimes too, same thing when they deal they do combat and things that would normally put it to 0. It doesn't matter. They're indestructible. The workarounds for this, though, are exile effects. If you exile something, it doesn't matter if it's indestructible. It'll go to the exile zone either way. And then the other one is if you use minus effects. So things that say, so in a Darksteel Colossus case, you'd have to say -11, -11. Find a way to do that to it or more. But at that point, what it does is the game checks, sees it has no power and toughness, and it cannot survive. It has no power or toughness, so it goes away.
I think in the beginning it confused me because I was kind of getting that you can't target it individually, but I thought board wipes work against it. I was kind of confusing it with hexproof.
Exactly,
right?
and that's how hexproof works.
So it was like, oh, it's indestructible. Hexproof, I kind of okay, what is what? But with indestructible, like you said, exile effects work on it. Minus effects work on it. So poison counters or minus counters, I guess. If somebody puts counters on it.
Poison counters, infect counter, weather counters. Technically, it's the -1/-1 counters is what you're looking for.
Or something like Blasphemous Act, right?
Blasphemous Act wouldn't do it because it deals damage. So that one won't do it. So there's a nuance to this that you eventually kind of get used to it, especially if you run with a lot of people. Even
to this point, as you explain it to me, this is good while we're going through this. Because it says give every creature -13, -13, right? Or
it says deal 13 damage to each creature. That's what's different.
So if it says deal the damage, it won't take the damage. But if it says give it a negative amount. Yes. If a card said that, then it would work on Darksteel.
If Blasphemous Act instead said give it -13, -13, that would work against it and get rid of it. But it says 13 damage, which is why indestructible doesn't matter. Indestructible will protect it.
Nice, but it's also indestructible, so it can block something bigger and not take that damage.
Exactly.
Too. So if something's a 20/20 and swinging in, the indestructible creature is just going to be like, oh, I don't care how big or small you are. You can't kill me.
Exactly. And just so everyone knows, too, trample will still go over for what it would normally kill it with. It'll still hit the extra over it. But otherwise, that's more of a corner case thing. Trample also has some weird running. And I don't think we're going to talk about trample very much. But that's one that has a couple corner cases that are a little unique. I don't know them enough even to come up with them off the top of my head. But you keep in mind, trample can complicate a few of these. But yeah.
So just remember with indestructible, you want to exile it, basically. Or if you can... give it negative, you can basically you can kill it. Other than that, it's going to be indestructible. on the battlefield.
Exactly. That's a great way to protect your creatures because of that. And again, for all these more nuanced cases, chances are they're not going to happen. Again, maybe 1% of your games will run into something rather difficult. Otherwise, just if you're not sure what that is, you can ask a more knowledgeable player you trust or a little more experienced player, and they might know the answer, and they might get stumped. Joel's gave me quite a lot of stumpers over the time period, so I'm not
Because
kidding.
I got a lot of questions, you know?
You asked some fantastic questions, Joel. I've literally never been more stumped by a new player than you in my life. You're like, well, what if this happens? I'm like, well, what if that happens? I don't know.
I want to know everything.
I feel very confident, and then the more you talk to me, the less confident I feel.
Oh, I'm not trying to make you feel bad.
No. I'm just very sure how something works, and you're like, but what about this nuance? And I go, oh, but maybe you're right. I don't know.
Well, that's the beauty of the game that Wizards have created. There's so many awesome things, and yet things still manage to work together. Like they don't have to ban that many things, it seems like, and things still work together. It says a lot about the way they design these cards.
It really worked out. So our next one is another one that some people stumble upon. It's First Strike and Double Strike.
Yes.
And really what it says, and this is specifically for First Strike, is this creature deals common damage before the creatures without First Strike. The quick explanation of this is, and this is what I think what helped you when you were trying to figure it out.
That's what we wrote it.
Basically, if you would trade the damage back and forth, something with First Strike wins, and Double Strike will hit generally for twice the power.
So with First Strike, so if you have a 4/4 attacking a 4/4, but the 1/4/4 has First Strike, right? So instead, the First Strike would win because before the combat happens, it strikes first. Boom. It hits that 4/4. Now that 4/4 is really a 0/0. So by the time you go to actually swing in, the thing's dead.
Exactly. How the rules works is there's two parts of the combat phase. There's a First Strike combat and a normal combat. First Strike damage happens on the First Strike part of the combat, and then everyone with normal damage swings in. With Double Strike, a creature attacks both during the First Strike phase and the normal combat damage phase. And that's the more rulesy explanation. But for most of the case, something with First Strike will trade and it'll win, and something with Double Strike, pretty much look at it with twice the power.
Okay. So if it was the same effect and they were both 4/4s and it had Double Strike, how would that work? Would the Double Strike still would win?
Just Double Strike. So if you have two 4/4s, one has Double Strike, one doesn't. Double Strike will act because it does First Strike damage as well. So it'll beat it outright, and then it won't, unless it has trample, it won't hit again. But in theory, yes, that's pretty much how it works. It's as if it had First Strike as well.
Okay. So again, there's a bunch of little nuances. Let's talk about maybe one of these cards.
Drawn a Liberator Malakir, which is one of the cards I actually really like. This one's a really good example of how First Strike works. It's Drana, Liberator of Malakir. It's 1 black and a black for a legendary creature vampire ally. It has flying and First Strike. And whenever Drana, Liberator of Malakir, deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. It's a 2/3. Now, what's interesting about Drana, what ends up happening is you swing with Drana, in the air, they can't block it, whatever. Then the First Strike damage happens. During that First Strike damage, everything gets pumped. And then whilst they're attacking during normal combat damage, everything has an additional +1/+1 counter. So that's a good example of First Strike in action in a Commander game where it really, really matters that First Strike went first.
There we go. Yeah, no, that helps to kind of clarify the motion, right? It hits, then it's pumping everything, and then everything hits plus it again.
Exactly, and that's one too. For newer players, if you're interested in that card, that's one of the ones that sometimes even an experienced player looks at. It's like, that's really how it works. They look at it and have to read it a few times. They're like, oh my god, that is scary.
That's a cool.
It's
card.
a great feeling, yeah.
It's the first time I'm seeing that card too. Now I'm thinking about it.
Oh, it's a very cool card. I went out. I did not pull one in a BFZ pack, and I opened a lot of Battle for Zendikar, and I went out. That was one of my first single purchases I did.
Okay, let's get on to the next one. Let's talk about Prowess. So Prowess is a mechanic that basically whenever you cast a non-creature type spell, that creature with Prowess will get a +1/+1 until the end of turn. So it's pumping it for that turn, but not till the next turn. It's not counters, but so in like a spell slinger deck, this would be good, right?
Exactly, and same thing with an enchantment deck or an artifact deck, because that's where some people get tripped up. It acts like it's instants or sorceries, but it's any non-creature. So planeswalkers, enchantments, and artifacts will all trigger a prowess trigger, and it's just until end of turn. It's not an actual counter on it.
So a card we pulled out as an example card would be. I keep wanting to say monastery, but it's monastery.
Yes.
Monastery Mentor for 2 and a white. It's a creature human monk with prowess. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess into the battlefield. It's a 2/2. It also, in some of the older versions of these cards, I guess when the mechanic was early, they'll have like the explanation there, right?
Well, usually if they can fit it, they put in the explanation. It's when the text of the card, there's so much going on. You'll see that a lot more with the commander cards. They don't have enough room. So especially if it's a mechanic for a set, when it comes out, and players, you'll see this as you keep on playing, newer players, the stuff at common and uncommon, if they can fit it, which they most often pretty much always can, it'll have the reminder text is what that is. And then as things get rare and mythic rare and they have less room on the card, if they can fit it, they put it, and if not, they can't.
Yeah. So on this one card in particular, they can fit it. So it says, in parentheses, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So that's great. Yeah, I think you can take advantage of that. And so I think that's pretty easy to understand for a new player.
In our format, too, there's a lot of prowess decks that actually run around and people really enjoy them. And, a prowess deck can be many different things, so there's a lot of variety within that. That's a fun deck archetype.
So if you can throw a bunch of stuff out there to do things you want, pump up your commander. Say your commander's a prowess commander. Swinging with commander damage, right?
Exactly.
So
there's a couple commanders that have prowess.
Yeah.
So the next one is probably, I think, the most complicated mechanic we have on here for the most part, and it's the one you're going to see the most often. So this is the one we really want to make sure we wrap our heads around. It's protection, and it's protection from a certain quality is what it says. So it'll always say protection from blank, whatever it happens to be. And what it says really in the inner detail is this can't be blocked, targeted, dealt damage, or enchanted by, and that includes equipping, by anything of that quality. So board wipes will still affect something that has protection, but something that targets it, it won't be able to target it at all. It can't be blocked by or dealt damage by. And then again, it cannot be enchanted or equipped with it.
A board wipe that would wipe the board would take it off. But if a board wipe is like a special kind of wipe where it's trying to deal damage to everything,
it still will take it out.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so. And actually, maybe I could be wrong on that. See, now I'm not a judge. I'm not so sure. Maybe I'll look this up while we're talking.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying, Joel. You asked the best questions. No kidding. That's something to your testament. You give me stumpers. And I'm sitting there going, oh God.
I just know that in certain colors it's easier to wipe boards, right? Like in white, especially in black and stuff. Yeah. And then in other colors, like in red and in other colors, it's harder to find board wipes. Sometimes you got to get creative and find cards like Blasphemous Act we already spoke of that'll just again, I just do 13 damage to everything, but that's what it says. It deals damage.
And then I think
if
you
you
might be right.
Protection from red, would it protect
I'm thinking
you
more
from?
of it's a board wipe angle, and I think you might be very right.
Yeah.
I'm going to look this up while we're talking.
So
about
I'll bring up the card while you're looking that up. The card we chose as an example card for this is Mother of Runes. It's 1 white for a creature human cleric, and it's a 1/1, and it has on the text, tap it, and target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. So it's great. This card, I can't remember the name of the card. My 7-year-old, as soon as I started playing Magic this year, he wanted to play with me, so I started building, just to go on a tangent, a bunch of pauper decks, and I put Law Rune Enforcer in one of his decks with a bunch of creatures, just a white and green pauper deck. And I taught him how to use it. I taught him how to pay 1, tap the Law Rune Enforcer, and tap down my biggest creature. And now he's really good at it. So like every time I play him, he's really good at figuring that out. So Mother Runes has a similar type of thing. It's pretty cool because at any point when these effects on the cards, especially for newer players, you can do them at any time. So if you can tap it, you can choose a color to protect yourself from if you're being targeted by somebody.
And I can confirm you are dead right, Joel,
Yes.
because it is dealing damage. It does not work with protection. I'm thinking more of it like a board wipe angle when I should look at it. And I want to talk about the other card. We have an example for for protection, just because it's such a cool card. It's really
It is a pretty
it's
cool
just a very
card.
famous Magic card. It is so cool. And
Like that artwork's so cool. We should use that as the
oh,
background.
I know, right? For those of you who will see in a second, it's very, very interesting. This is usually a lot of people. This is their win condition in a 5-color deck. It's Progenitus. It's white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, green, green. For a legendary creature, Hydra Avatar, it has protection from everything. If Progenitus would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal Progenitus, shuffle it into its owner's library instead. It's a 10/10, which I think is really cool.
That is really mean. So like I've not played this card. I don't know anything about this card. It's the first time I've seen this card, but I'm thinking about it. And if I was to build a deck, since you have every color, I would think I'd have a lot of tutors in my deck, and every time somebody wiped out my commander with the board wipe, I'd throw them in my library and pull them out. Because that's a steep cost. 10.
People do that.
Mana.
Progenitus is such a cool card, and a lot. Again, it can be your commander. I've seen the Progenitus deck before, and pretty much what happens when Progenitus is once it gets out. If you can't counter it, or if you can't have an immediate instant speed board wipe, often they have a way they can use haste or trample or something. It just swings in and pretty much starts knocking people out left and right. It is a very powerful card, and does have, again, protection from everything. That includes other players, that includes colors, that includes pretty much anything that aims at it, tries to deal damage to it, block it. Nothing can.
So another thing to understand as a new player, protection from everything. So that's once it's resolved and on the battlefield. Blue players will play a lot of counter spells. So if you're ever trying to play this card and somebody counters it, that card is not yet on the battlefield, so that static text of protection doesn't really apply at that point. Right?
Exactly. It's only once it's in play. It has protection. As it's casting, it's a spell on the stack, at which point you can respond to it and you can counter it. But again, often this decks will play stuff like your creatures can't be countered kind of stuff, or give everything haste and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Pretty much it comes in, it starts just swinging in on people. They can't block it. They can't really do anything to stop it. It kind of just gets the train rolling, and it really goes to town on people's life totals.
That's a really cool card. I love that. What's like a 1, 2, 3, 4? It's like a 5-headed dragon.
It is so cool. I don't know. There's a couple of cards. I'm a Timmy player, for those of you at home, which means I like big things, and I really appreciate Progenitus.
Big old dragons. I mean, what's cooler than that? The next mechanic we're going to talk about is Shroud. So Shroud is something that you'll encounter, especially in Commander. There's a few cards. This card, actually, we're going to talk about. So the permanent or the player can't be the target of spells or abilities, basically. And a real popular card that is used a lot for protection is Lightning Greaves. It's 2 generic mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has haste and Shroud, and you can equip it for 0. Now, I know that Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots are 2 cards that are very popular to put in your commander deck, so you can quickly get something onto your own commander or a powerful card to protect it. And both of them give haste. But this one, as opposed to Swiftfoot Boots, which I think gives hexproof, this has Shroud.
Yes.
So Shroud's a little bit different. So it can't be the target of spells or abilities, but that includes your own spells or abilities. So you couldn't put your own enchantments on it. As well.
Exactly. Just keeping in mind with Lightning Grease specifically because it has equip 0, you can move it around, so you could equip it to something else, put something on your creature again, and equip it back. So that's not the best one example I have. But most things with Shroud, once they're on your creature, you can't target it either. Unlike Hexproof, where Hexproof says your opponents can't target it, Shroud is more nuanced in that you also cannot target it. So if you want to pump it up for a pump spell, or if you want to, equip, if you have a Voltron deck and you're trying to equip a bunch of things to it, or enchant a bunch of things to it, you'll have to find a way to remove the thing giving it Shroud first, and then you can do that.
Yeah. So Shroud will just protect you from whatever has Shroud on it cannot be the target of spells or abilities. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The next one we'll talk about is Landwalk. So it's usually it talks about a different color, right? Like Swamp Walk or island walk. But this land walk, basically the creature can't be blocked as long as defending player controls that same color, right? So if it's swamp walk, if they control swamp, that creature can't be blocked as long as defending player controls that swamp, right?
Exactly. So it looks at what your opponent's lands are, and it kind of, the flavor is it kind of walks over it. It goes straight for the person's face. They can't block it with a creature. They have to get hit by it when they have it. Island walk's the most common because a lot of merfolk have it, but there's a variety of things. We actually have an example card here.
Yep.
It's Cold-Eyed Selkie. It's one hybrid or one generic mana, and then a hybrid green and blue and a hybrid green or blue mana, which look for a creature, merfolk, rogue with island walk. So that means, again, this creature can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls an island. And whenever Cold-Eyed Selkie deals combat damage to a player, you may draw that many cards. It's a 1/1. So you'll see this one in Commander every now and again. They get in. It always will draw you for one, pretty much as long as your opponent has an island. And then if you pump it up a little bit, you'll get some more cards.
I think one of my early Commander games with our play group, I don't recall the cards, but our friend Randall played an Island Walk creature, but then he played something that turned all of our lands into islands, which was really annoying. Like every turn, he turned another land into an island. So at one point, we all had islands, and then he was just able to take over. It was depressing, but it was. That
was a pretty fun game.
That was pretty fun.
There was a lot of ways we were trying to get around this just slow loss to everything becoming an island.
Yeah, it was a great way to use the Island Walk feature, our mechanic in the game for sure. So that's what land walk basically is. Okay. So the next one, we're going to talk about cycling, huh?
Yes.
So.
Cycling is a great mechanic, by the way. I want to point out to our newer players, when you're building a deck, cycling is always a plus. It replaces, the card will replace itself. It can always be put away for extra value. And the question is whether it counts as a draw spell. There is a little nuance to that. I would generally say yes, but there's an asterisk to it that it's not enough to just have cycling usually in a deck. You can have a couple cyclers, but don't count that as your only draw spells. There's a certain point where having probably more than 3, it's no longer really a draw spell in your deck. It's not I wouldn't count it after the 3rd cycler you put in your thing or your deck to make it count.
Yeah, and I think with cycling, what's kind of cool about it, because I've seen it not just on creatures, but I've seen it on lands and different things, is it kind of gives you that second utilization of it.
Oh, exactly.
So it's like having, like you said, like having the flexibility to, I don't need to have another land, so let me just cycle it and draw a card instead, right?
It's perfect. It's if it's going to be a dead card in your hand, definitely cycle it away. Sometimes you get extra bonuses just for the cycling side of things. But again, it's really flexibility, which is what we look for in our format to have in your deck.
And our example card for that is, am I saying this right? Vizier?
Yes.
Vizier of Tumbling Sands. It's 2 and a blue for a creature human cleric 1/3. On the text it says tap. So you can tap this creature and then you untap another target permanent. And then it also has cycling. So cycle for 1 and a blue. Discard this card, draw a card. And when you cycle Vizier of Tumbling Sands, untap target permanent.
What's very cool about Vizier, and you'll see it every now and again, and it's only an uncommon too, so it's not too expensive. But basically, you can play it as a creature, and you can untap permanents, which is very powerful. You can do it for lands, but you can also do it for things like your mana rocks. Maybe you have a very large mana rock that can tap for a lot of mana. You could tap it, untap it with Vizier, and then tap it again. So it's very powerful. And then at instant speed, because cycling can be done at instant speed, you can cycle away Vizier to untap something as a surprise that your opponents don't know that you have it in your hand to either get up more damage or have a surprise blocker even or something.
Nice. So you can tap to tap. So when you cycle, you untap another target permanent. So you can you can totally untap your Gilded Lotus, use a bunch of that mana again, and then, I'm going to cycle again, and then untap it again.
So You would have to find another way to untap it. It's only when you cycle it that you get to do it. If you found a way to untap Vizier...
So you couldn't cycle it when the creature's tapped?
No, you can't. You have to cycle it from your hand. You discard it and then draw a card is what cycling specifically is. And in this scenario, you get an additional effect for untapping something.
I think that's good to note because I do remember that now you're saying that. And I like to talk through these for that reason for us newer players because in the text it says 1 of blue, discard this card, draw a card. But when it's saying that, it's assuming discard this card means discard it from your hand. You're not discarding this from the battlefield. You're not discarding it from your graveyard. You're discarding it from your hand. So that's how cycling works.
Exactly. And for those of you who are wondering, we're recording at my house today, which we don't often do. We usually record at Joel's. And I have my dog with me, and she's been very good in being quiet in the corner, but she randomly moaned to the side while she was lying next to us. You just want people to think you're having a gas issue, because it's what it sounded like out of the corner of the room. You know, well, there you go. I appreciate it. I'm glad I cleared that up, because I wouldn't want someone jumping on that.
I'm glad you cleared the air, too.
Maybe we'll put a doggy picture up there. I find her very cute.
Yeah, there you go. More editing for you.
There you go.
All right, what's the next one?
So this is a combined one. The most way often you'll see it is infect, but poisonous is also a mechanic that use these counters as well. Poisonous you don't see nearly as often. Mm-hmm. But basically what it says for infect is this creature deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters and to the players in form of poison counters. So a poison counter is something very specific to the game. Mm-hmm. So basically a poison counter, when a player has a poison counter on them, basically it starts an alternative way to lose the game. Once you have 10 poison counters, you've lost the game as a player. So instead of trying to take out 40 life or 21 commander damage, you can try to go for an infect win, which is only 10 damage to strike with.
Yeah, which I've seen in some of these infect Atraxa decks, because Atraxa will proliferate your counters. So you put those -1 counters out there, and then use Atraxa to continually proliferate that and cause a lot of damage.
Exactly. And
I can think of a guy in our playgroup.
Yeah, exactly.
That same deck. Yeah. So this card, Ichor Rats?
Ichor Rats, I believe.
Ichor Rats. For 1, a black and a black, it's a creature rat that has infect. When Ichor Rats enters the battlefield, each player gets a poison counter, and it's a 2/1. So that's great because you just spread the love, you know.
Exactly, and he used this to create a fit in an Atraxa deck, and it would go great in an Atraxa deck. Basically, start that timer, and they don't really have a choice. They have to kind of counter it because once it enters the battlefield, we're all going to have that poison counter, and then he can proliferate and give us additional counters to start ticking them up, and really we will feel that pain. For those of you who don't know, when you're fighting against an infect deck, basically, and that's the only advice I'm going to give against a specific mechanic, infect is very frustrating, especially when you're a newer player.
Yes.
You're sitting there going, man, they just get to beat me fast and everything else. What generally happens with infect is people are scared of it, as you should be. So the infect player usually gets teamed up a bit against, or what ends up happening is you always leave a couple blockers up for infect, and that way you never gain the poison counter to begin with. But of course, this card gets around that.
Oh, this wouldn't work. Sorry, I was looking through my things and thinking of this card will work, but it only works on +1/+1 counters.
No, yeah, there's only one card that actually removes poison counters. It's not very good. I would not run it either way. There is a card that came out in Hour of Devastation called Solemnity. That makes it so your players can't gain counters in the first place. So you could use that potentially to protect yourself from gaining that first counter. So that way you could protect yourself that way. It's not a card that sees much play, but I don't know. Maybe there'll be a more nuanced case for it or a deck built around it.
Oh, for sure. So that's Infect. The next mechanic we want to talk about is Intimidate or Fear. So the creature basically can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and/or creatures that share a color with it.
And that's Intimidate specifically. Fear was the original version of it that specifically cared if a creature was black or not. And then they turned it into Intimidate so it could be put on other colors, where it cares about what color that blocker is or not. That's the creatures.
So I'll go ahead and read this. It's Bellowing Tangleworm. It's 3 green and a green for a creature worm, 4/4 with Intimidate. So other green creatures you control have Intimidate. So it gives you and your other creatures, which this creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or creatures that share a color with it. So other
In
creatures
this case, green, yeah.
Yeah.
Or of course, if your other creatures, your other green creature intimidate, if they have an additional color with them as well, that other additional color could also block it. That individual creature if you
Okay.
played in a multicolor deck, yeah.
So that's a nuance there.
Exactly. And it makes intimidate slightly worse, but even then, you can put it on more things. I mean, it's one of those things that you don't run into it terribly often, but often something that really wants to kind of beat hard with your face in will have the intimidate mechanic.
So if you have fear, basically only artifacts or other black creatures can
Yes.
block you. Otherwise, everybody else is afraid of you.
It's exactly. It's more narrow. I think the thought is, yeah, things are scared. It was the flavor. So the next one is one that actually came out very recently, and just so everyone knows how, I think we made this script. We have a quick outline that we use for. I think we did this before the Commander 2019 decks came out.
I think just before, yeah.
Just before, and then they had a whole mechanic based around this, which is Morph and Manifest. For Morph, it's you may cast this creature face down as a 2/2 for 3, and you can turn it up any time for its Morph cost. And Manifest is put it onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature, then turn it face up for its mana cost if it's a creature card. And often Manifest, you'll manifest the top card of your library, let's say.
Okay. And this card they put in that deck, by the way.
They did, and they actually have the number of these that a lot of the good morphs are in that deck, and that's a very surprisingly powerful deck right out the box. Holy cow! We've had a different episode where we talked about how you were beating me with Kadena, and I really had to attack it from another angle. I didn't. Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah, no, Kadena had. Yeah, there were a lot of counters in there because it ran blue, but having this one specifically and these kind of effects were great because that morph effect, which is a nuance to it, it's a special effect, right? So it can kind of happen at any time. It can interrupt a lot of things. So you can play it at instant speed as long as, of course, you can pay for it.
Since it's the mechanics episode, I'll go in a little more detail. So for you newer players, Morph is what's considered a special action, and you cannot be responded to. So it's kind of almost like when you unmorph something that it has split second, which is another mechanic that says this thing can't be countered. So you can't really counter it. It happens instantaneously. There's only a point in the game where once you decide to flip it up, there's not a point that someone can respond to it. It's either face down or face up, and that's just how it is.
Okay.
It makes it very powerful.
And so the card that's our example card is Stratus Dancer. It's 1 and a blue for a creature, Jing Monk, 2/1. With flying, it has Megamorph cost of 1 and a blue. So, and when Stratus Dancer is turned face up, counter target instant or sorcery spell. Counter target instant or sorcery spell. Megamorph is like Morph. The only difference is you get an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And it says it there, you may cast this card for face down as a 2/2 creature for 3, turn it face up anytime for its Megamorph cost, and put a +1/+1 counter on it.
Yeah, Megamorph is just a variant on Morph that it adds a +1/+1 counter to it on top of it. So it is a type of Morph. You play it as if it's Morph, except it gets that +1/+1 counter. And Stratus Dancer is a 2/1.
Yes.
As well. But yeah, what's nice about Stratus Dancer specifically is you have it in your Morph deck, or you're just a normal deck, and it's pretty much an uncounterable counterspell. It only can hit instants and sorceries, mind you, but that you can't respond to it with another counterspell. It's just going to flip up, and then it's countered it.
And there are a lot of board wipe and removal spells that are at instant or sorcery speed that this thing can basically counter. And what's nice in the Kadena deck, I don't have the card in front of me to read the whole thing, but you basically get to play your first Morph for free. And so putting this down, and then at any point, you only got to pay 1 and a blue to turn it up and counter something. It's pretty powerful if you ask me.
It's very powerful.
Pretty darn powerful. And Manifest is like Morph, but what I learned about Manifest is because there are different cards I can't think of at this moment that'll tell you just manifest the top card of your deck or manifest this. It doesn't have to necessarily be a creature. It could be a land, it could be anything, but once it's manifested in that way, you're going backwards. You got to use 3 fingers.
Oh, Max.
Macs are great if you know how to use them.
I'm a PC guy. No excuse, though, for a network engineer. But yeah, specifically what I was going to do is a card that came to mind was Reality Shift as one we can use as an example for Manifest. Manifest is a little more nuanced. It's one that... basically, you play stuff from the top of your library. So anything, unlike it just has to be a creature for Morph, anything can be a manifest.
Yes.
But with a manifest specifically, if it's a creature, you can turn it face up, but if it's not, it stays face down.
face
So
down,
there's
yes.
advantages and disadvantages for having a manifest thing.
Exactly.
And reality shift specifically is 1 in a blue for an instant. Exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of their library, and that says that player puts the top card of their library onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature. If it's a creature card, it can be turned face up anytime for its mana cost. So this is a great removal spell if you're like stuck in a mono blue deck, because it exiles a creature, just flat out. It exiles it, which is not something blue generally gets. They get something in return for it, but again, if it's a land or something, it's just really a 2/2
I was
creature.
about to say, last time somebody played Reality Shift on me, it kind of did damage to me because it made me put my what card was it? Phyrexian Altar upside down as a 2/2. I was like, that's my cool free outlet. That's my sack outlet, and I can't have it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So it could do unintentional damage, which is pretty cool.
Exactly.
Okay, well, it's the last mechanic we want to talk about is regenerate and recursion, which is interesting because like the first deck I built, my Taste of Karlov deck, which we have done a deck tech on, has a lot of, there's different cards that do regenerate or recur. And I didn't quite get it at first, like the difference or how it works. And it's a little bit different for each card. So the next time a creature would be destroyed, it isn't. Instead, you tap it, you remove all damage from it, and remove it from combat. I didn't quite understand what we wrote there.
I believe that's the flat out of it, the quick version. But specifically what it is, Joel was having trouble because it acted like most players do. They want to actually do what regenerate sounds like it does. It sounds like it's something, it goes to the graveyard, and then maybe it heals itself for something and brings itself back, which is more like a recursion type effect, which is not a keyword mechanic at all. Mm-hmm. It's just a vernacular players use to describe something that brings itself back or something else that comes back. But with regenerate, what it is instead is the next time the creature would be destroyed, it isn't. Instead, you tap it as the alternative, and then you remove all damage from it and remove it from combat is the full out rules version of it. But how I would look at it if I was a new player is when something would destroy it, instead tap it instead.
Okay, yeah. And then basically it'll come back if you pay for it.
You don't even come back. Yeah, I would literally look at it. You regenerate prior to you being destroyed or in response to about to be destroyed. Mm-hmm. You'll regenerate the creature, pay the mana for it, and then instead you tap that creature instead of it being destroyed.
Okay, so for this card, this is our example card, Nightscape Familiar, is 1 in a black for a creature zombie. It says blue spells and red spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and for 1 in a black, regenerate Nightscape Familiar. It's a 1/1. So if somebody was to attack you or destroy or remove this, instead you can pay the 1 in a black to regenerate it.
Exactly. You can kind of look at it. So anything that would get rid of something with indestructible will also get rid of something with regenerate as well. But specifically for regenerate is it's a scenario when something would destroy it, and that includes a board wipe or something. You could tap it, and then instead of it being destroyed.
So does it untap immediately after that turn's over, or does it have to wait till your next untap?
It's still untap when it normally would untap. So if you wanted to destroy it, they tap it to regenerate it. Then you try to destroy it again. It can no longer tap. You could get rid of it by going at it twice.
So I'm trying to think of a few of the different skeletons that, they go to your graveyard. One you can retap, or you can regenerate. It comes back. But one of them, I can't recall, it was Gutter Bones. I can't remember which one says where it comes back to the battlefield.
Yeah, and a lot of them will come back, but again, that's not regenerating. Regenerating is just instead of it being destroyed, it taps instead, which is where all the confusion comes from. It sounds like it goes to the graveyard or it dies. It doesn't actually die, and just instead, it will tap.
Okay, I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, so this would be, let's just mention this because this is where I want people to understand the difference, because this is where I would get confused. No, so Gutter Bones is 1 black for a creature skeleton warrior. Gutter Bones enters the battlefield tap, and of course you play it. Untaps, you play it. And then for 1 in a black, return Gutter Bones from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your turn, and only if an opponent lost life this turn is a 2/1. So this, you can only use this ability if it's in the graveyard.
Yes,
so
correct.
regenerate is like something that's happening while it's on the battlefield. It's going to be attacked. You regenerate it. So
Yes.
you tap it down.
There's not a
basically.
point in regenerate where it goes to the graveyard. It's an
Okay.
alternative thing versus hitting the graveyard, where something like this would be a type of recursion spell that Gutter Bones has, that it can put itself back, use your recursions into play, but back into your hand and all the above, where it's not stuck in your graveyard, it's back in your hand, which I add count as recursion.
Yeah, and there's some that'll take it back to battlefield, but it has to be in the graveyard in order for you to utilize that ability. Basically.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so that's something important to understand, for sure. I think that was the last mechanic we're going to talk about this week. Of course, there's a lot of different mechanics, and again, if you're playing with people and you don't understand something, of course, there's the text there. You can look it up on Scryfall. You can look it up on the different various websites and try and get an explanation for it. But don't be afraid to talk to people about the different mechanics, especially when you're playing paper Magic over Arena. Because again, Arena will just do all this stuff in order on the stack, how it's supposed to be done. But don't be afraid. And we're going to get to the last part of our episode. We're kind of, we're just the beginning. We're just coming up, throwing out new names out there. We're going to call this part of the episode Ramp Up. So it's time to ramp up. We want to talk about different things that we might not have talked about during the episode that'll kind of take you to that next level. So for this ramp up, what do we want to talk about?
So this was me being goofy. So it's a terrible one for us to introduce this on. This
I
is
do it
more
anyway.
while I was writing the script, I was kind of like goofing around, and I thought, what's the worst mechanic that exists in the game? And it's a mechanic that if someone plays a card from it, you concede immediately. You never play with that player ever again because they are a terrible person.
Wait, what?
It is the mechanic called banding, and I will not even attempt to explain what it does
Wait,
because it's
just
the
say
most
it again. I've never heard about
complicated
this.
mechanic that exists in Magic the Gathering. It's called banding. It is just so terrible mechanic. It was the first mechanic they got rid of. It came in from the very start of the game. It was so complicated. Professional Magic players did not know what it did.
Didn't you just explain it though?
No, I didn't. You quit playing immediately. That's what I explained.
It's
the
so
mechanic
bad
does.
that the person just stands up
no.
and
You
walks
just
away.
walk away. If someone's going to play that in their commander deck, don't play with them. It's not worth it. I swear to God, it's really
Now
it's
you got
the worst.
You're gonna
mechanic.
make me go onto Google and look up what banding
Everyone's
is.
going to look at banding. Don't play with banding for the love of God. It is just, you're sitting there and you will never remember what banding does. You can have a cheat sheet that says what banding does, and you'll read it, and you'll read it again and
Okay.
again, and you'll never get it.
Anyway, in the future, we're going to have these ramp up sections to our longer episodes to kind of give you guys extra steps, extra things you can do to learn more, to take something to the next level. So mechanics, of course, there isn't really one. So I guess you want to
Oh,
joke
this
around
is a
about
goofy
banding.
one, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess the ramp up would be really get to know people. Don't be afraid to talk to people about, oh, how does this work? Like even as you're about to do it, I've done it before where I'm looking at 2 or 3 cards in my hand, like I want to do it this way. I think this is how it works. And it's kind of like showing your hand, but you're a new player. Like I literally have 3 people that I'm like, I'll put the card out and be like, if I play this like this, is this how it'll work? And I'll ask the people. And it's showing your hand. You're not going to win that game, or even if you do, but at least you're learning how to utilize that.
If you're playing at your local game store, don't be afraid to ask a judge if this is how it works.
Yes.
Feel absolutely free. If you're playing with your friends at home, just like Joel said, take a look at your card. Say, hey, does this do what I think it does? Feel free to ask someone, because at least
Yes.
I'm of the opinion that if someone could do something a certain way, you let them do it. You act like it's a surprise if it's not, especially when they're new. It's one of those things that it's, you're not going to learn without asking, right? It's no point in avoiding doing something that's totally
right.
legitimate.
Yeah.
Just ask, yeah.
Just do what I do. I just annoy the heck out of Alex and give him a million stumpy questions.
I'm going to be honest. Joel, the questions you ask me, it's so impressive. I just like all the compliments to you. I literally sit there and go like, I never came up with these things as a new player. I was so
I see
cookie
what
cutter.
you're doing. I see what you're
I
doing.
was so cookie
Trying to
cutter. I
butter me
just
up.
I literally I would come up with I would play so by the rules, and I just assumed if it was too complicated I was going to worry about. But no, you'll sit there and you'll go, does it work this way? And just like with Blasphemous Act earlier, you had the answer and you knew it better than I did, and I even thought for some reason that wasn't the case, and I looked it up and I said, no, you were dead on.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, by the way, with our conversations. Joel will ask me something and I'll be like, oh no, Joel, you were right, or just flat out, yeah.
You're just trying to butter me up because we're doing an episode at your place for the first time. You want me to make the drive instead of you making the drive.
Oh, God.
No, Alex, you're still making the drive. Oh, anyway, and also look online, like Scryfall. What are some other? Is Scryfall?
Just Scryfall has some general rulings. Magic the Gathering, their Gatherer website has some general rulings. But honestly, for Blasphemous Act, I didn't see the ruling I wanted there. I typed in Blasphemous Act into Google as well as protection, and like the first three results was someone on a message board posting it, and then someone else having a response, and I said, "Oh, there you go."
And there's a lot of great Magic people out there on different Discords and on Reddit and different places. You can just ask questions. People will give you good ideas of where to go to look for things.
Exactly. There's actually a judge website, and I wish I remembered what it was for the start of this episode. They literally have judges that just hang out there and answer questions for players, and it's a fantastic resource. So maybe if I come across it, I'll say on a later episode.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for today. Thanks for listening to our episode. If you like what you hear, or you have a new Magic player in your life, you want to get them involved and get them listening, do just that. Check us out on Twitter. Check out our Patreon. We got some cool stuff for free stuff for you guys there to check out. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
See you.